Session. Agenda, we don't need one. So, start out. Who wants to start? Start with the declaration.
Well, it's whatever you want to talk about. It's only one topic, so.
Yeah. Well, I can read it if everybody has one. I don't know if it's what time to read it if everybody's got something. Other than that, anybody have any issues, members, that they want to discuss here?
I just like to kind of hear our attorney's opinion on, why we're here, and I like to hear from Al, both of them, to kind of give us a synopsis of what we're talking about here.
Yes. Yeah, I think, so we had the meeting a couple of months ago, and at that time, I felt like it was my recommendation to go ahead and approve that. I think with the board not approving it, then we went back to the drawing board a little bit of how they could make some adjustments that would, make the board comfortable. I think that, I've been through the declarations, the bylaw amendments, and the new resolution. I think everything looks good. I'd recommend approving it, but if you have any other questions of me as we go along, we have to answer them, but turn it over to Alan.
Alan, yeah.
Well, thanks for being here. Obviously the process started in 21 and we got off to a little slow start, breaking ground. So we finally got a reapproval in 23, as we're all aware. Broke ground in 23. We're just about done with the project. I think the great thing is you can drive by it now and you don't have to guess what it is going to be. It is what you see, and everywhere I go, I get compliments. I'm very proud of what the guys are doing there. And we have yet to landscape it. We won't be able to landscape it till spring, but when we do, it'll be impressive because we'll be landscaping. Everything along the road will be landscaped, and we'll do some vegetation trees on the back of the buildings to the south. It'll be impressive when we're done. One of the things I think that is important in the approval process of this is that it would seem that it would be a win-win for us and for the town to maximize the assessed valuation of that corner. It clearly maximizes the assessed valuation to have some of the units sell, and eventually over many years, probably all the units will be owned by someone other than the Collins family. But I think the good news is, if you drive through our managed projects, Centennial, Maple Ridge, we have them all over northern Indiana, they all look the same. We're very safe, and we're very fair, but we enforce the regulations, the rules that we have had everybody sign, that either is a tenant or an owner in the homeowners association. And then the other thing is, I think it probably kind of tells a little bit more about the story, but we have 3 buyers for units at this present time that are waiting for the final approval. All of them own homes on the lake. And these folks will put their toys away in the fall, and a lot of them won't be back here very frequently until spring. And I anticipate that'll be the case for a lot of the tenants and the owners. I would think I would be accurate in making that statement. Other than that, we just would appreciate the final approval so we can move forward. And if you have any questions that we can ask, we're here to. That you can ask, we're here to try and answer them.
I'm sorry, could you remind me how many units are there total? So when you say units, you mean individual units?
There's 7 buildings and a total of 21 units.
And
individuals can lease,
Or buy.
pardon,
Or buy.
or they can lease or buy.
Yeah, but we're just about sold out of the solar units. We're only, at the present time, we're only planning on selling part of the units.
And I would, as a caveat, either lease or buy, subject to the documents you've received. So
Yeah.
there's no like fee simple ownership with a lot that they could then, use to their wishes. They have to comply with the terms as with the documents you've received.
Well, with the, I mean, calling it SOA, but HOA, whatever. But everything in here is for that, for the owners. I mean, how would that affect ones that just wanted to lease?
They have to comply with their lease, which complies with the homeowners association rules and regulations. Everybody that lives or uses, I should say, uses a facility for storage would have to comply with the homeowners association rules and regulations and use a standardized, they'd have to sign a standardized lease, which also parallels the rules and regulations on what's expected of a tenant.
Okay. But, I mean, I know we talked about the SOAs years ago, how bad they were, and I know what you're talking, I know what you're talking about. But with these people that are leasing, they wouldn't be members of the direct.
No, the owner of the building or unit would be the member of the HOA, and they would be responsible for supporting the enforcement of the rules and regulations, which would be enforced by our management company.
And I don't want it to get to be, I mean, they talk about Florida where it was pretty much started, where you had things where the owners that were on the board would kind of influence whatever could happen to other units, non-members or whatever. So I didn't know if you had more leases than you did owners, then you would have a minority of it there would have the dominance over what went on in the unit.
Initially, we will have more ownership as a Collins entity than we do other owners. We would have over 50% ownership.
That was really my only concern on this, that even how are you in as far as the responsibility in the bills, as far as from somebody leasing?
Well, the first thing
The
they do,
owner's
if they
gonna be required for every,
if a tenant's breaking the rules, the first thing we do is put them on notice. And then typically, that's all we have to do. There's been an occasion when someone doesn't follow the rules and we have to evict them. If it's a member of the HOA, they can be fined. And the fine is can be levied against the property. The property could actually be sold to pay the fine after litigation, of course, but we could never even come close to having to do something like that.
right, now, I knew it could probably be an unusual case,
Yeah,
and me not being as familiar with, I mean, I've always owned everything I had, so I never had to worry about leasing, what consequences can come from HOA or whatever, so I just had those questions just for peace of my own mind.
I like to go in first and say, please, and then I just open the door and let Burke in, it's over.
So help me. There's really no difference in my understanding of a lease or a rental, correct? I mean, that's
Same
generally
rules
the
and
same.
regulations.
So if I'm leasing a unit, I'm not part of the homeowners association. I would have to own a unit,
You would not be a member as a tenant,
but I have to follow the rules.
but you're obligated to the rules as outlined in the lease. And the owner of that unit that we're leasing it for, because we would do most frequently, we do all the leasing. So if we're leasing it for a owner, that owner is obligated to support, our management efforts to correct the problem.
So the decisions that you make on how you want to manage.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
It's kind of like you have the owner of the unit as an overseer of the tenant to make sure they're following the rules, as well as the HOA and the management company are making sure that the owner and the tenant, so there's a couple of layers of oversight there from inside development.
So if you had a tenant that's leasing and they're just not following the rules, they're not doing what they're supposed to, could the management break that lease with that person and say, look, you're not adhering to the rules, so therefore we're done with you?
As a management company, yes, we can make that decision and evict them. That's our responsibility to take care of. We manage over 2,000 rentals, and we have total control over evictions in all of those. So the biggest problem we have from time to time in residential is people don't pay the rent for a sundry of reasons that you can imagine. Some of them are hardship cases, and you always try to work the best you possibly can with someone that is in one of those situations. But we would evict anyone that causes a nuisance, especially. We would evict them after a warning in the next offense. Nothing ruins a project quicker than having a bad apple.
Right.
It makes people not want to live there. And we're very strict. We hate to be that way sometimes, but that's why people like our facilities, is because we enforce the rules and regulations.
Right. If you sell a unit and you have, say, 3 owners of that one unit, how would that affect with all 3, or would it just be the unit that's having a member on the HOA?
Great question, Barry. The way it works is each building gets the same percentage of votes. Those votes are split between the number of owners. So if there were 3 unit owners in that building, each one of them get 1/3 of the votes of that building.
So it's based on the unit itself.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if it's 5 owners or 2 owners. So that's
There's one building that has 2 owners, one building that I'm keeping that has 1 owner. There's 2 buildings that have 3 owners and 3 buildings that have 4 owners, for a total of 21 owners.
Right.
And each building gets the same number of votes, and every building pays the same amount of dues.
Yeah, in here it talks about owners being, whether it be a commercial corporation, partnership, association, trust, whatever. So in that case, if it's more than 1 owner for 1 unit, the building's still gonna restrict the 3.
They have to designate who's going to vote for that unit.
All right,
They only get the vote that is for
one
that
vote
unit.
per unit. Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
As I said, it was owner of a unit versus owner of building, just kind of the clarification there. So yeah, each unit gets 1 vote, whether that's
Yeah,
a group of people.
so just the
or a
ownership of the building is 1 vote,
Yeah,
regardless whether that's.
and they have to
25 or
pick who
30.
that person's gonna be. And they're not necessarily a member of the board of directors or anything, but they have a say in the HOA process.
But,
Representative democracy.
yeah,
And Steve, I just want to clarify, but this is classified C2, correct? The land is commercial. So
Yeah,
it's a
C2.
C2.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest concern is, and I was not here in 21 when it officially came across. But when it came across, there was a public hearing where we talked about this being a rental property. Now we're talking about an HOA. We have not had a public hearing to cover. That would be, my concern would just be the people that live in that area being okay with that change.
and that's my greatest concern. Al and I both have discussed that. He knows my feelings.
I've got no qualms with it being an HOA. but I don't live right there, so.
Well, honestly, if I was gonna be I like Maple Ridge. I agree with Alan, the stricter your HOA is as far as the majority of the residents would like. Because you have more control. You got somebody that don't want to mow the yard, of course, they might worry about that. As far as the nuisance part, all that stuff, it's got restrictions on that that are in here. So,
And one answer I could kind of offer to that too, and those meetings we talked about the lease as a mechanism to provide or answer to the concerns that the demonstrator, that the people who were here had concerns about, what if this, what if that? And the lease was kind of the mechanism through which we enforce those rules. And we still have that same mechanism now to enforce those concerns that they have. It's just a different document. And then we still have a lease. That's the same lease that we used as.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't
So that's the.
think there's any issue with moving to an HOA. It's
right.
May I
part
say
of the
something?
responsibility of this group is to hear the public on these decisions.
Oh, yeah.
Well, may I say something, Andy? I met with 3 of the gentlemen. I didn't get to meet with the Andys. I wanted to. This has never been a request to determine whether we could sell our property or not sell our property. It's really not even the responsibility of this team to make that decision, in my opinion. I think the decision that we requested is, does what we want to build qualify as a special use under the C2 special use section? They talk about it being many warehouses. We already know that there is not another many warehouse facility that I've seen, not in this region, that would rival the money that we put into that project. And part of the reason for the hearing is that, is it something that people want to drive by and see? Is it something that's going to create a tax base that is a responsible tax base for that site, for that location? You know, this will be my 3rd year coming up in Marshall County in real estate development. What we've done there exceeds the wildest expectations of everybody I talk to. They visualized a mini warehouse facility like we have in town now. Far from it. Very expensive buildings, upgrades, the upgrades in those buildings is amazing. You get to see it now. Is that a warehouse facility that meets the expectations of the community as defined under special uses? And it clearly does. And that's the responsibility of all of us as a team, is to provide the community with something that creates a great tax base, the highest and best use for the real estate, and protects investment of the investor. And we've done that. And that's why we would discuss ownership. Had I been in those first meetings, I regret not being here. I would put a stop to that immediately, and I would have simply said, if we're going to have a discussion about ownership, I'm in the wrong place, because there's approximately 100 different things we can do with that right now in C2, and we don't have to have a discussion about ownership.
It's true.
And I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean it because this is a major investment for any developer. And we should have had this done already. And it's holding up closings. That's a no-no. I never let that happen. But I want to be a team player. I want to keep doing business in this community.
So in terms of moving forward, I know that we have the resolution, I think, that was sent around also with stuff. Is that right, Steve? That everybody has a copy of that?
I did forward that to everyone.
Yeah. I'd leave it to Sean to just see, do you think that that's a step we could take tonight or the board could take that under advisement and do that on their own? How would you
They
proceed?
couldn't approve it tonight, but I think if we could just get a consensus that if you're comfortable with moving it onto your, the next meeting's agenda to have it considered for approval is what I would be looking for tonight.
Well, I think under fact that we don't really have an agenda and we don't have any public here to have any input as far as what we do with that forward, I would say wait for the next meeting before we do anything forward on this right now.
We don't have to do a legal notice on it. I'll have to, I've already got a note on the agenda coming up. I've added it on. I have to do a 48-hour
So is that gonna be
notice.
on this meeting Thursday?
We could be on this Thursday's meeting. Yes.
So we could decide to put it on Thursday's meeting,
It's already on.
or it's
We
on.
already
We can't vote no or yes either one tonight.
Yeah, but I guess, I mean, if you're all telling us that you don't like it, I mean, we're not gonna put it on the agenda, but if you feel like the questions have been answered, and I would say legally that I think handling this through the resolution process rather than going through another public hearing is sufficient based on all the process that we've gone through.
And, you know, when we first had, when this whole process started, we had that public hearing. And I think there was basically the Luttrells came to the meeting. They were the only neighbors that really, and they're right there. You know? So anyway, and it seemed like we answered, if you remember, we answered their questions and concerns. So I just don't think that we needed a public hearing for this. That's my opinion.
No, I mean, as far as having a public hearing, no.
Right.
I don't feel public hearing, but I mean, we have to have an official meeting regarding that.
You can't take any actions tonight.
Right.
Thursday night, it'll be on the agenda, and if you choose to take action, you can.
I have a number of questions still, and as Al and Burke know, I've gone through this pretty extensively. And we've gone back and forth on a few things, and a number of revisions have been made, and I'm pretty happy with most of them. I still got a couple questions, okay, Burke? We talked about in the leases, the lease agreement, the rental agreement, about the use of co-owners and owners. Okay. And I still have some concerns about writing up a lease agreement and then referring to co-owners as far as things that have to be followed. And I don't know why it doesn't say leasee, okay? I mean, I understand what you're trying to do here.
Well, the most recent one I sent out took those into consideration and took those off.
Most recent one I have is 24/12/11 revised executive storage lease agreement that I got from that you sent to Steve.
Yeah.
And it still says in here on the third page, section P. Section P as in Peter, as well as on the next page, section T. And there's all sorts of use of the word co-owner, 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 co-owner. Owners, owner, owners, non-owners, owners, and leasees. So, I mean, it's to me, it's very confusing. And again, it's a lease agreement. And so I question how can a lease agreement contain provisions in it that list co-owners or owners, and it's meant to be that the leasee's got to follow what the co-owners are saying, you know?
Right, that was my purpose of the question.
Yeah, so in some of those, it talks about access to the unit and those types of things.
Right.
And it's providing notice to the lessee and anybody else that you're going to be able to access the unit in the event of an emergency and those types of things. So it's kind of in there as part of, you're just aware that if there's an emergency, you need to be on notice that we would access the unit as a lessee, a co-owner, or whatever it might be. You know, again, always working on the document to be approved, but it talks about if a if a co-owner or owner doesn't pay the fees, the association dues, it talks about the lessee could do that. Well, in order to discuss that section, I have to talk about the owner and say, as it talks about that in here, it says, if they don't pay the insurance, the association, talks about the responsibility of the owner, and the lessee could pay that if the owner doesn't pay it, to keep the unit in compliance. So it kind of provides some of those.
Some of them are intentionally co-owner.
Correct. So it could be co-owner of, if you have more than one person that owns the unit, you're giving notice to both of the owners.
Okay, but
Um,
here's where I get really confused. Let's go to the section P. And it says the association or its duly authorized agents shall have access to the unit from time to time. Okay, during reasonable hours, upon notice to the co-owner thereof, as may be necessary for maintenance, repair, or replacement. Okay,
Right.
So essentially what you're saying is the association can go in there as long as now let's just say you're the co-owner and you're leasing it to Joe Blow, okay? All right, so what that tells me is Joe Blow doesn't have to be notified that Al's going in the building to check. That's kind of how I read that, okay?
Well, I think it would have to be that you would have to notify the owner of the unit, certainly that you're going in. We would also post notice oftentimes if we're going in to do regular maintenance, they post notice 24 hours before they go in.
Let me explain something. One of the reasons it's written the way it's written, let's say we can't get a hold of people
Sure,
and the heat's been on.
Yeah.
And it's gonna freeze up
okay,
and we gotta get in there.
Yeah.
We make provisions that in the case of emergency or in the case of the inability to get a hold of somebody and we need to get in, that we can do so. I haven't read the exact verbiage of what
yeah,
and I'm not good at listening to somebody read something and keeping up with it. I have no
Yeah.
trouble reading it myself. But that does not surprise me to hear that we would have something that would give us access if we need to get access.
I'm not disputing it. I guess my concern is that this is a lease agreement and it's not, the leasee doesn't necessarily know what's going on. And I don't dispute the fact that you have a reason to get in there, but it's the leasee could be left hanging out in the cold, not knowing, okay? And furthermore, just let me go into one more section here, where I think this makes a little bit more sense. Section T starts out, leases do not have the right to sublease any unit they are leasing. Okay. All right, now let's go down into subsection 1, where it says the association shall notify the owners by certified mail advising of the alleged violation by the leasee. Shouldn't the leasee also be notified?
They would be.
Okay,
They would have already.
but it doesn't say that. Okay, and that's kind of where I'm getting at. It might be pretty nitpicky, but still,
The association, I don't think would want to take on the responsibility of notifying lessees necessarily from the association. Because the lessee doesn't have a relationship with the association.
okay,
The lessee has a relationship with the owner.
And the management.
And the management arm, if they don't pay, if the management arm is hired by the owner to lease the unit, then the management arm would notify the lessee for their failure to pay rent or failure to comply with the rules or something along those lines. But here the association, as it's listed, would notify the owner because they're the member of the association. So there's a second layer there from the property management side. If the property management company is tasked with overseeing the lease, then they would contact the lessee as per their agreement with the owner of the unit who's having the management company manage the property.
okay,
If a unit owner so chose to collect the rent on their own, and do it all themselves,
Okay,
then the property management company
Okay,
wouldn't be at fault at all.
I just wanted, after, we had our talks and you made the changes.
Yeah.
I still was a little bit fuzzy on the logistics of this and so on, so.
If you, John, if you decide to rent one, I guarantee you we'll sit down and get a cold beer and go through it.
Be careful what you sign.
Then the only other thing,
Can I ask you one question on that? When you're talking about access to these, getting access, I mean, how many actual reasons would there be for access to a unit other than emergency or whatever situation?
It rarely happens, but sometimes a tenant will abandon a place. We've had tenants abandon rentals and never respond, never come get their stuff or anything. It happens. I don't see it happening here, but.
sort of like the old.
It's storage wars, right?
I'll tell you what, if they abandon it, I'll help you out.
I'll take it in. Breaking in. Just let me know what unit it is. I'll take care of it for you.
Master break in, something like on those walls, somebody's going in. I mean, they got access to the knock system, whatever. I mean,
Right.
Anyway, I was just trying to compare the two. What
The best example I could give you of what has happened is a pipe breaks. There's water running out from under the door. And in that scenario, we'd make all the calls we could make, we'd shut the water off, but we got to get it dried out as soon as possible. So,
not necessarily
and we've had that happen.
like a fire or anything.
Yeah, well, fire, we're gonna break the window and go
Right, break
in.
the
Yeah.
windows, whatever, yeah. But I mean, part of plumbing issues, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Then the other thing is, at one time you mentioned something about, sitting out, smoking a cigar and drinking a beer. Okay. All right. Which is fine if you want to do that, but it's 2 a.m.
Okay.
Okay. And nowhere in there is there anything that says no overnight stays. It refers to it indirectly in codes or covenants or whatever, as far as nuisances are concerned. Right. And so I'm just thinking, you're sitting out drinking a beer and smoking a cigar. It's 2 a.m. And is that defined as an overnight stay?
No.
What defines what an overnight stay is, for one, and two, the police drive by regularly. I mean, and they see somebody sitting out there. That could be cause. I mean, I've seen them out with their spotlights going through the cemetery for things. Right. And while you might be behind a gate, people can jump a gate. I mean, we've had crime here. And so what's to not give cause to a policeman to think that that's not a nuisance?
It wouldn't be classified as a nuisance.
It's on the property.
It's not, I think a nuisance is to have a negative impact on the neighborhood or neighbors.
Yeah.
To me, as a landlord, if a husband and wife are sitting out on the deck at 2 o'clock in the morning, having a drink and he's having a cigar. In fact, we have a lot of women that smoke cigars too. I would never classify that as a form of nuisance.
But that's private property. No.
This is private property.
This is private property.
But it's subject to the zones of commercial.
Well, I would also, just to kind of add to that, is I would say that we would not, nor do I think it would necessarily, Sean can maybe add into this, to say that we would not try and prescribe what the police can and can't do with the code, with the declarations and the lease. If the police are driving around, they have the penal code, that if they think that if they have probable cause to investigate something, they follow the penal code to do that.
Yeah.
And if they investigate that, if they think that that looks like something and they investigate. I mean, it's gated, but there's not a fence around the whole thing, so someone could just walk onto the property.
Okay,
Yeah.
So if someone walks on, we would encourage the police to investigate it.
okay.
If they
Yeah, if
think
they're trying to
coming.
break in or
Yeah.
appear that they could.
I'd agree. I think our police are pretty good about knowing what's going on. My wife and I walk and we walk up Obispo Street and then around through the cemetery and back onto the trail. So we're in that area at least a couple times a week, more in the summertime. And on our walk from our house on Liberty Street out there, the police officer, whoever's on duty, probably passes us like 4 times, just, patrolling. So
Yeah.
I think they have a pretty good sense.
We
of
would encourage
what's
the
going
police to
on.
be there. We would give them free cigars.
Well, these would.
Not here, though. Not here.
We have the nuisance ordinances on the books concerning noise, concerning this, so it would be redundant to have something special.
Okay,
They're not excluded from.
I mean,
I just wanted to make sure that those things were kind of covered under what the nuisance was, and I kind of wanted our attorney's feedback on that.
Sure.
Sure.
And I think it's
I
kind
know
of a
you call it
drafting
commons
rule.
area as well, right? I mean, so you can come out of your unit, you can walk around even, they want to walk out toward the gate, whatever, pass in front of your building and then go back to theirs. I mean, as long as they're not shooting fireworks off and shooting guns, I mean, but
Yeah,
they can take their walk in whatever, drink beer, smoke cigars,
I'll
whatever.
be asleep, Barry.
and kind of as a drafting maxim, you would not want to include in a lease or a declaration or anything what the law is, because then you cement what the rule is, and the law is ever changing.
I
So we would defer to the law to say, whatever it, progresses to be, we comply with.
Yeah, I understand. It's just I don't have access to all those codes,
Right.
the definition of what nuisances are and so on and so forth. And part of the genesis of all of this was there would never be any overnight stays. And we just want to make sure that that's still going to be the case.
I don't want to confuse an overnight stay with residency. A person could be working the first shift and be there till late in the morning and have their own little private office in there if they wanted to, and be in compliance with zoning. The bottom line is that they can't set up residency, and there's defined
Yeah, I saw that.
definition, refined the definition by state of residency. And we would quickly enforce that if we felt someone was abusing the regulations. But there'll be an occasional time when somebody's there all night for whatever reason. Maybe they're working on a project and they're there half the night. We can't enforce that, but we certainly can enforce non-residents. And that's what we will do as we promised. And we'll enforce our rules and our regulations.
What if someone's got their RV parked in there and they sleep?
They can do that, actually. You're not gonna stop it.
If they did it and we didn't know it, we wouldn't know it.
Full right.
But if they're notoriously staying there week after week, and we're gonna catch them and we're gonna put a stop to it.
Because that's not technically residency.
No, it's not. But if they set up housekeeping there full time, that
I would be more concerned with like the sewage dumping and things like that.
A Plymouth moving out from under the bridge.
Yeah, the facility.
And that's
doesn't
kind
have-
of what I was concerned about. If there's going to be an RV in there, nobody's going to know. But
if nobody knows, I won't be able to enforce it. If I know, I'll be able to enforce it.
when you, and then also, I guess, when you say residency, if somebody spent 60 hours there continuously,
Residency is permanent.
okay, that's not residency, but that's certainly in violation of the spirit of what's supposed to go on in there.
And if they had wild women and lots of good booze,
You'd be
we'd
there
enforce
too.
it. I'd have to be there. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think that the overarching issue is kind of also looking into, as we enforce this lease as a landlord, and we say, what can I take into court and have the judge enforce? And oftentimes, if you include things in orders or leases that are not as able to be monitored or able to be enforced, then the judge will say, well, I can't do that. And there's a 1,001 maxims as to, well, I can't oversee that. I can't verify for sure. They were in the unit. Well, you know, you don't know what they were doing in the unit. You don't have cameras. You don't have witnesses. And so how can I say that just because they were in the unit from this time to this time, they slept there? But a perpetual nature of being there overnight for a long period of time would give concern to people using the lease as a residency and not as a storage facility or a place to store one's toys and clean them, those types of things.
Yeah, I have an example, just from my time working at the city of Plymouth, we actually had an issue with an RV in a subdivision, and all the neighbors complained that people were staying there too long, and we modified our zoning rules to put it like you'd only stay in an RV for like 8 weeks a year when it's, parked there. And then we, violated the family for doing it. And then the guy appealed it to the court, and we got into all those issues of, what's the proof that they actually were residing in it? And it's a mess. But I think I'm just sharing that because if this becomes a problem in an RV or anything, people are going to know it and they're going to take care of it. If they're secretly doing it in there and nobody knows about it, I mean, maybe they get away with it, but then it's not bothering anybody either. But I think if something happens, it's a problem, it's going to rise up. And these guys
there are mechanisms in the lease that talk about if someone uses a unit in a way that would increase or cause problems with the insurance.
Yeah.
Well, our insurance is scheduled for a certain type of use. If they're using it outside of that, it's going to increase the cost of the insurance. We can have them evicted or fine them, and then, just as any other violation. So those are maxims or ways that we can enforce those rules that are enforceable by a court. Whereas in using some terms that are less, that sound good but are less definable, are not as enforceable.
Well, utilities,
Sorry.
and the lawyers are here, so you know that anytime you try to make something that might be enforceable, and I use might because you've got the word ambiguity. And anytime that you got that ambiguity, you're not going to be enforceable because you're going to lose when you try.
I'm going to lose, right? Yeah.
The
utilities
on that set up by individual unit for water and sewer.
I'm trying to remember.
What's the question?
Is the water and the sewer being billed by individual unit?
Each unit has its own utility meter.
And there you have it.
Except for water.
Yep.
And then water is shared equally by the units in a single building.
And that's going to be your tell-all, guys. If we've got somebody establishing residency, you're going to see it on the bill.
And
you're going to see it.
Their neighbor owners or lessees in that building are going to have to notice it too.
Yeah.
Still
Is
there going to be any kind of gate to get in here?
Yes.
Okay.
Like
That's kind of identifying. So
we haven't finally decided that yet. It'll either be a fob or a overhead door opener, probably in all likelihood.
And we discussed that kind of to have access, that it's got a pretty good range so that they can push the button and the gate will open so as to restrict being stopped on the road.
right.
So now as they get there, they can pull in. And then an emergency access for the police. There's a couple of different ways, but one of them is to have a lever, like a hidden lever somewhere, so you don't have to have a key fob. Because the first thing it's going to go in a drawer, it's going to go in a cabinet somewhere and be lost. So there's mechanisms on the gates themselves that the companies that make them have, that emergency access can go up, break the glass, pull the handle, the gate opens, and they go in.
You'll still have the Knox boxes.
But you got
What's that?
You'll have Knox boxes.
on the units,
Knox box is the,
they're
like
the.
Knox box, will safe boxes.
well, I don't know.
They're required by ordinance.
They're required.
Okay.
If it's an
Whatever.
ordinance,
Yeah.
it'll happen.
Yeah.
I can get you an application form if you want.
Yeah, access.
That provides access to.
The fire department, police, EMS, they have a key that they could open. You can store
Store the keys.
you can store a key, you can store a remote opener,
I got you.
so they can go up, they'll have a key, they can open it and they can access it. So you don't have a hidden handle or anything like that.
Yeah, then that, yeah, I mean, the point was to say whatever the ordinance or the police require, then that's where the fire department.
I can get, I can get you the information.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
really,
we probably don't know yet.
they got Knox boxes where you can actually have the key to the box. And
I'll send it to you.
Any of the units,
Yeah,
or else you can have a master key. I could always whatever
Yeah.
master key. That would be locked in there. And
Well, if the fire department would take a set of keys, we would let them have them.
yeah,
We have in other towns.
That's the purpose of the Knox box. So they have one master key, so they don't have a set of keys for every building.
Put it in the door and get lost.
Make sure you
yep,
bring that up in tomorrow's meeting.
put it,
I'm sure,
Is there a key?
I'm surprised you don't have anything like this. Plymouth has them also.
I don't know that we have anything gated. On that.
I'll send you the application
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
Even on your new building. I would think you want them there.
Yeah, because we'll have to do the same thing.
If you have an emergency, they don't have to kick your doors in. They can open it,
Yeah,
save you money.
Okay, well, those were my concerns.
okay,
Thank you.
yeah. And I'll look back over the lease too and make sure to see if there's any of those to clarify and, you know, always improving a document, it's always a good thing, so to look at it, to see if there's more clarifications in that. But that's it, I think we're on the agenda, already.
I'll redistribute an updated one with that's on there. I really don't have to have them out, actually agendas until right before the meeting, so I'll send a new one out.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Very helpful.
Are we done?
I want to introduce you guys to Steve, Keith Wola. He's our Chief Operating Officer for the Collins Equity Group. Keith comes from actually Munster. But he practiced law and was a partner in a firm in Valparaiso.
Well,
And he's also a tax CPA, so he's here to keep me out of trouble.
well, as a
That's a full-time job.
as a former resident.
He's the only one you got.
Everything else you just named. Well, I'm glad you brought him because we